Hey, you know what time it is? Woo! Get into it, babe! Yes! We are back. Welcome back with Storytime with Chris. As I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, relaxing time, maxing, chillaxing, in between time, mean time, study time, break time, anytime, CP time. You want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, adventure, science fiction, and many, many more in between. You've come to the right place, lovelies. All right, we are back with Lloyd Alexander's Taran Wanderer, and we have a character we haven't seen in, well, we haven't seen him since the second book. So it's been at least about a book and a half, I would say, because half of the second book he ends up leaving. But Dolly's back, but not in the way that we suspect. He's been turned into a frog. And now we need to figure out what happened to our magical dwarf of the fair folk, the right hand of King Idaleg. And I don't own the music that you're listening to in the background. Chapter 7. Friends in Danger. Dolly! Echoed the astonished bard, falling back a pace. His eyes bulged like the frog's, and he clapped his hands to his head. It can't be! Not Dolly of the fair folk! Not good old Dolly! Gurgi had just then come up with a leather water flask, and hearing Fluter's words, began yelping in terror and dismay. Taran took the flask from Gurgi's trembling hand, unstoppered it, and with all haste began drenching the frog.
"Oh, terrible! Oh, horrible!" moaned Gurgi. "Unlucky Dolly, unlucky, unhappy dwarfish companion. But how did this froggy swallow him with gulpings?"
Under the stream of water the frog had begun to revive, and now kicked mightily with its long hind legs.
"Skin, skin!" came Dolly's voice. "Pour it on my skin, not down my throat, you clot! Are you trying to drown me?"
Great Balin, murmured Fluter. At first I thought it was a frog who happened to have the same name as Dolly, but I know that temper anywhere. Dolly, Taran cried, is it really you?
Of course it is, you long-legged beanspole, snapped Dolly's voice. Just because I look like a frog on the outside doesn't mean I'm not myself on the inside.
Taran's head spun at the thought of Dolly in this form. Gurgi was speechless, his eyes as round and wide open as his mouth. Fluter, as stunned as the other companions, had recovered somewhat from his first shock and now dropped to his hands and knees on the damp turf where Taran had set the frog. You've chosen a strange way to travel about, said Fluter. Did you weary of turning yourself invisible? I can understand how that might be tiresome, but a frog? Though you do make a handsome one, I remark on it the moment I saw you. The frog rolled up his eyes in utter exasperation, and his green spotted body began to swell as if it might burst.
Chosen? Do you think I chose this? I'm bewitched, you ninny! Can't you see that?
Taran's heart skipped a beat. Who bewitched you? He called, aghast at the weird fate which had befallen his old companion. Was it Ordu? She's threatened us before. Did you too journey to the marshes?
Idiot! Numbskull! Reported Dolly. I've better sense than to trifle with her.
Who then has done this to you? Taran exclaimed. How can we help? Dolben surely has power against such enchantment. Have courage. We'll take you to him.
No time, Dolly answered. I don't know if Dolben can break the spell. I don't even know if King Idaleg of the Fair Folk could do it. Right now it doesn't matter. If you want to help me, Dolly went on, dig a hole and put some water in it. I'm dry as a bone, and that's the worst thing that can happen to me. I mean, to a frog. I learned that quickly enough. He blinked at Fluter. If that giant cat of yours hadn't found me, I'd be dead as a stump. Where'd you ever get such a big one?
It's a long story, began the bard.
Don't tell me then, snapped Dolly. As for what brings you here, of all places, you can explain when there's more time.
He settled into the muddy basin Taran and Fluter had scraped out with their swords and filled with water from the flask.
Ah, that's better. I owe you my life. Oh, what a relief. Thank you, friends. Thank you.
Dolly, we can't let you stay in this plight, Taran insisted. Tell us who cast this evil spell. We'll find him and make him lift it.
At sword point, if need be,
cried Fluter. He stopped and peered with renewed fascination at Dolly. I say, old boy, what's it really like being a frog? I've often wondered.
Damp, is what it's like, retorted Dolly. Damp, clammy. If I thought turning myself invisible was uncomfortable, this is 100 times worse. It's like... Oh, don't boggle me with stupid questions. It doesn't matter. I'll manage somehow. There is more important work afoot. Yes, you can help me, Dolly quickly went on. If anyone can help me. Strange things have been happening. So it would seem, agreed the bard, to say the very least. Fluter, let him speak, Taran broke in. His life may be at stake. Strange things, Dolly resumed. Peculiar, unsettling. First, not long ago, word reached King Idaleg in our realm at the bottom of Black Lake that someone had plundered a fair folk treasure trove. Broke into it, made off with the most valuable gems. It's rarely happened in all the history of Prydain. Fluter gave a whistle of surprise. Knowing Idaleg, I can imagine he was rather sour about it. Not for loss of the gems, replied Dolly. We've more than enough. It's that someone was able to find the trove in the first place, and in the second, dared to lay hands on fair folk treasure. Most of you mortals have better sense. Could it have been Arorn or any of his servants? Taran asked. I shouldn't think so, put in Fluter. As I remarked only today, even the Lord of Anuvan would be more than cautious with fair folk. For once, you're right, Dolly answered. No, not Arorn. We were sure of that, but we had only one report, incomplete, from a fair folk watcher in the hill cantrives. No tidings from the guardian of the waypost here. That, in and of itself, was very odd. Idaleg sent a messenger to scout around and get to the root of things. He never came back. Not a single word from him. Idaleg sent another. Same thing. Silence. Dead silence. You can guess who was chosen to go next. That's right, good old Dolly. Anything disagreeable to be done? Any unpleasant task? Until then, Taran had never been aware that a frog's face could show such a look of indignation and of being much put upon. Dolly snorted, as well as he was able in his present state. Naturally, send for good old Dolly. But you found who did it? Taran asked. Of course I did, Dolly retorted, but I failed in the end. Look at me. Now, of all times, of all the useless things to be, oh, if I only had my axe. The fair folk are in danger, he went on hurriedly. Terrible danger, yes. I learned who found our trove and stole our treasure. The same who cast this spell on me. Morda. Morda? Taran repeated, frowning. Who is Morda, and how could he have done so? Why would he dare to risk Idaleg's wrath? Why? Why? Dolly's eyes popped furiously, and he began to swell up again. Don't you understand? Morda, this foul villain of a wizard. Oh, he's shrewder than a serpent. Don't you see? He's found a way of bewitching fair folk. No enchanter has ever been able to cast a spell on us. Unheard of. Unthinkable. And if he's gained the power to turn us into animals, fish, frogs, no matter, we're at his mercy. He could slay us out of hand if he chose. That's surely what happened to the Waypost Guardians, to the messengers who vanished without a trace. It could happen to any of us, to Idaleg himself. Not one of the fair folk can be safe from Morda. He's the worst threat ever to fall upon our realm. Dolly sank back exhausted by his own outburst, and the companions glanced fearfully at each other. What his scheme is, I couldn't discover, Dolly continued at last. Oh, I tracked him to his hiding place easily enough. He lives in a sort of enclosure not too far from here. I'd gone invisible, needless to say, but it was making my ears buzz so much worse than a pair of hornets' nests. In the darkness, I thought I could change, turning invisible just for a moment to escape that awful buzzing. Next thing I knew, there I was, as you see me now. Morda could have crushed me then and there. Instead, he mocked my plight. He amused him to see a helpless frog. Then he threw me down among the rocks. He savored my lingering agony more than the mercy of killing me out of hand. He was sure I'd perish in these dry hills, withering little by little to my death. But if by some chance I didn't, what difference could it make? How could a frog hope to prevail against a wizard? I crept away trying to find water. I kept on until I couldn't go any farther. Your cat found me then. If she hadn't, I can tell you it would have been the end of me. One thing Morda forgot, Dolly added. One tiny thing he overlooked. I could still speak. I myself didn't know it at the time. The shock of being turned into a frog quite took away my voice for a while. Great Balin, murmured Fluter. I've heard of people having frogs in their throats, but never... Forgive me, old boy, he added quickly as Dolly glared at him. I didn't mean to ruffle your feelings. Dolly, tell us what we must do, Taran cried, horror-stricken at the dwarf's account. It was not Dolly's plight alone that turned his blood cold. He saw clearly the fate in store for all the fair folk. Lead us to Morda. We'll try to take him prisoner, or slay him if we must. So we shall, exclaimed Fluter, drawing his sword. I'll not have my friends turn into frogs.
No, no, shouted Gurgi. Froggies are froggies, but friends are friends.
Attack Morda? Dolly replied. Are you out of your heads? You'll end up in the same pickle as me. No, you can't risk it. Idleleg must be warned, but before that I must finish my task. Find out more of Morda's powers and how he means to use them. There's no hope of fair folk standing against him unless we know better what we have to deal with. Take me back to Morda's stronghold. Somehow get to the bottom of his scheme. Then carry me to a waypost so I can get word to Idleleg and spread the alarm. A sudden spasm convulsed him. For an instant, Dolly seemed about to choke, then a racking sneeze nearly flung him out of the puddle. Curse this dampness, he sputtered. Curse that black-hearted Morda. He's given me all the bad points of being a frog and none of the good. Dolly began coughing violently. Blast it!
Now I'm losing my voice. Make haste! Make haste! Pick me up! I'll show you the way. That's too time to waste.
Because he's losing his voice, so I'm trying to make it sound like he's slipping out of speech, because the enchantment is furthering and making him into an actual frog. The companions hurried mount. With Dolly clinging to his saddle horn, Taran galloped where the dwarf commanded, but the forest thickened and slowed their pace, and often in the tangle of branches they were forced to dismount and go afoot. Dolly had assured them that the distance was not great, but his usual unfailing sense of direction had grown confused. At times the dwarf was uncertain which path to follow, and twice the companions reined up and retraced their steps.
Don't blame me, snapped Dolly. I came over this log crawling on my belly. It's not the same thing as from up here.
To make matters worse, Dolly began to shake and shudder. His eyes bleared, his nostrils streamed, and even as a frog he looked altogether miserable, with constant fits of sneezing and coughing. Dolly's voice grew so hoarse he could barely force out a feeble, croaking whisper which did nothing to improve the state of his disposition or the clarity of his directions to Taran. Until now there had been no sign of Ka. When the companions first hastened to follow Dolly's orders, the crow had chosen this of all moments to be exasperatingly disobedient. He flapped into the woods, stubbornly refusing to heed Taran's pleas to come back. At last Taran left him behind. Sure, the crow would rejoin them when he saw fit, but as the companions made their way deeper into the forest, Taran had grown more anxious for the impudent bird. Thus, when they halted to set Dolly on the ground, where the dwarf insisted he could better regain his bearings, Taran was too relieved to scold the crow when Ka finally appeared. The prankster, Taran saw, had been up to his old tricks, for he bore some glittering find in his beak. Squawking proudly, Ka dropped the object into the surprised Taran's hands. It was the fragment of polished bone. "What have you done?" Taran cried in dismay as Ka, overweeningly pleased with himself, rocked back and forth and bobbed his head. "The jackanapes!" burst out Fluter. "He's gone back and rifled the coffer. I thought as well rid of that enchanted toothpick. Now we've got it again. A sour jest, you magpie," he explained, flapping his cloak at the bird, who nimbly dodged away. "A flab is fun-loving, but I see no joke in this at all. Throw it away," he urged Taran. "Toss it into the bushes." "I dare not, if indeed it's a thing of enchantment," Taran replied, though he felt as uneasy as the bard and heartily wished Ka had left the coffer undisturbed. A strange thought, vague and uninformed, stirred in his mind, and he knelt holding out the fragment to Dolly. "What can this be?" he asked, after briefly telling how the sliver had first come into their hands. Could Morda himself have hidden it?
"What does?" croaked Dolly. "I've never seen anything like it, but it's enchanted. You can be sure. Keep it in easy case."
"Keep it?" cried the bard. "We'll have nothing but ill luck for the cursed thing. Bury it."
Swayed by Fluter's vehemence, yet reluctant not to follow Dolly's counsel, Taran stood, uncertain what to do. At last, with strong misgivings, he tucked the fragment into his jacket. Fluter groaned. "Meddling will only gain trouble, mark my words. A flam is fearless, but not when there's unknown enchantment lurking in someone's pocket. Oh!" As they pressed on, Taran shortly came to believe he had decided wrongly and that Fluter's unhappy prediction was well-founded. Dolly had taken a turn for the worse. He could gasp no more than a word or two at a time. The frog's body trembled as in the grip of a painful ague. A sickness, Taran was sure, owing to Dolly's grueling crawl overland. To keep his skin from parching, the companions drenched him regularly, while the treatment on the one hand kept him alive, on the other it added to his misery. Under the stream of water he sneezed, choked, and sputtered. Soon he sprawled listlessly, too feeble even to be bad-tempered. The day had waned quickly, and the companions halted in a glade, for Dolly had given them to understand that from now on they must travel with utmost caution. Setting the frog carefully in the folds of a dampened cloak, Taran drew Fluter aside and spoke hurriedly with him. "He has no strength for his task," Taran murmured. "We dare not let him go on." Fluter nodded. "I doubt he could, even if he wanted to." The bard's face, like Taran's, was drawn tightly with concern. Taran was silent. What he must do was plain to him, yet despite himself he shrank from facing it. His mind groped for another, better plan, but found nothing, returning always to the same answer. What kept him from taking the clear course was not reluctance to help a close companion, for he would have done gladly, nor was it fear for his life, but terror that he might share Dolly's fate. Not only that his own quest would fail, but that he himself might be imprisoned, hapless in some pitiful creature shape, captive forever. He knelt at Dolly's side. "You must stay here. Fluter and Gurgi will watch over you. Tell me how I may find Morda." And that is where we will end for tonight. And that right there, y'all, is a prime example of courage. Courage is acting in spite of your fear. Courage is, by definition, performing an action, knowing that the task is either daunting or scary, and still doing it. Courage is acknowledging that you are afraid, but still going ahead and doing it, despite the odds, despite how frightening it may seem. That's courage. What makes the mast on the boat wave? Courage. What makes the sun rise in the east? Courage. What makes the Totten hot so hot? What puts the ape in apricot? What have they got that I ain't got? Courage. You can say that again. Shout out to anybody who's seen Wizard of Oz. You know what I'm talking about. Shout outs to Cowardly Lion. The Wizard of Oz and the Wiz is both fire. But courage is about doing what you know is right. There is no thinking. You've already made the choice. You have to understand why you made the choice. And Taran knows that this wizard, which I find to be really interesting, because it's been a while. I was very young when I first started reading this series, y'all. And when I was a kid, I could understand the concepts of what was going on. But one fact I found out yesterday. So, if you are familiar with the character of Merlin, Merlin was an advisor to King Arthur, Arthur Pendragon. And he was incredibly wise, very powerful, was said to have been a great wizard of incredible knowledge and wisdom and magical power and potential. He was incredibly well known in Arthurian and Celtic legends. But in Welsh folklore, did you know that the term Merlin is not a name of a person, it's a title. It's a title to refer to someone who is a great teacher or one of great knowledge. And this character of Morda, who is a wizard, is shown up in this story. So I'm rather curious if that Welsh folklore is going to show up, that part of Welsh folklore, because this is very much so a Welsh fairy tale series. But I hope that gets pushed into the story, and we'll see next time we meet. I love you all. Have a great Monday. I'll see you next time, okay? Bye-bye.